So last time out with Project Beta, me and Brendan upgraded the hard brake lines and the fuel lines from Classic 2, but obviously today we have a lot more brake parts to install. We're going to be doing a 4-wheel disc brake conversion. Now Brendan, what is the reason why you'd want to do this to your Classic Mustang?
Well, the biggest reason is you get better braking power because those drums, they don't break and they'll overheat when you start getting onto it. These disc brakes, they'll vent, they'll cool, they'll get good stopping power, but the big also reason is you get a dual bowl mass cylinder. And so you don't have one pot where you lose a brake line and you have no fluid. Now you have two, one for the rear, one for the front.
And the kit we're going to be installing today pretty much includes everything you need for a 4-wheel disc brake conversion on your 65 through 66 Mustang with an automatic and a factory V8 with the factory V8 spindles. So we're going to have front rotors, rear rotors, calipers, like Brendan said, dual bowl master cylinder, and this is a power conversion, so it also includes the booster and every piece of hardware you're going to need for the installation. So like any other upgrade, we're going to start with disassembly. I'm going to remove the master cylinder from the engine bay. Brandon's climbing underneath the dash to make the disconnections underneath the dash. We'll explain what we're doing in a minute. In our case though, remember we did replace our brake lines, so all of our factory lines, we either remove them or cut them because they're simply in the way. So removing the master cylinder will be a lot easier. Start by bolting the master from the firewall.
So what you're going to want to do is you're going to pull this pin, which will release the push rod off the brake pedal, and we can get the mass cylinder out. So we're going to move on to removing these drums. We have to remove our dust cap, the bearing nut, the bearings, and throw it all in the trash. Luckily, I have a trash right here. It just falls right in. Remember kids, always wear gloves. It's dirty. Mike Rowe would tell you, it's a dirty job. Into the trash. Another thing that we're going to be throwing away is the backing plate with all the drums. Just take the 4 nuts off and throw it in.
So while Brendan's over there disassembling, I'm going to bench bleed the master cylinder. This is a must do before you install it. Now these hoses, clips, and everything are all included with the kit. What you're basically do is put it in a vise and get it level. We're going to put fluid in it, making sure these hoses are in the fluid submerged the whole time. Then use a blunt object like a screwdriver. Basically what you're going to do, push the piston in until we get the air out of the master cylinder.
Now that we have everything removed, we're gonna just clean up the spindle. Scrap it like a wild Okay, now we're jumping onto the rear. We're gonna remove our drum, the backing plate like we just did on the front, and remove our e-brake cable. Just pull in the drum and throw it in the trash. Ooh, wow. That's sludge.
Yeah?
Just grab your backing plate and toss it off.
So we're starting out with the master cylinder and booster setup. To do that, you have to remove these 2 bolts. Now you may not have those, or maybe new holes there. If there aren't, you do have to drill them. In our case, they are there, so we're gonna remove these bolts. Now this is the factory bolt. Now the head of this bolt will get in the way of the bracket and not tighten down straight. So you got 2 options, either grind this off or just find another bolt that'll work. Now we're gonna grab the brackets to mount our master cylinder. Basically this one here, the middle bolt lines up here. Okay, we have the bracket in place. Now we can remove the bolt from the other side. Use the factory hardware, put the bracket in place.
When Bill sends the booster in, what we're doing is I put a block of wood under the brake pedal. That's the height I want the brake pedal to stay at, and then I adjust the push rod to the length to slide under the brake pedal. Once we did that, then we can tighten down the nut.
Okay, put the booster into place, the port up, install and tighten the bolts. This part is tricky because it's really tight. to assemble this bracket before we install the master cylinder, this is distribution block. It goes underneath and bolts to this. And when we bolt our master cylinder into our booster to hold it in place. Now we're going to install the brake lines from the master to the distribution block. Now these are going to go like in an X pattern when they're on. So we can put them on and tighten them up first. Now we're going to pull these fittings out, and you will get some fluid. There's really no way around this. Put some paper towel down first here. Make sure the short throw adapter is in the master cylinder. We'll put it down into place. Restore the front brakes. Now, first thing to do is grab these dust shields, and you have to actually trim this edge off. With the 4-piston caliper, you need just a little bit more room. Basically just go straight up like this.
Now that Bill trimmed the dust shield, we're going to take our caliper bracket that comes included, put it behind the dust shield, grab your bolts, slide them in, and put it on the spindle. The caliper brackets are side specific, so make sure that the caliper bracket is pointing towards the front of the vehicle. And then when mounting your caliper bracket, there is a long bolt and a short bolt. The long bolt goes right through the steering arm.
Now we'll grab the inner and outer bearings and get them ready to actually put on the car. They have to be greased. First of all though, get rid of the races. There are new races already in the rotor assembly, so we will not need these. Now we're going to grease the bearings, and there's two ways to do this. You can do it by hand and kind of slowly work your way around all the needle bearings and push grease in, or buy one of these. This is like 25 bucks at any part store. Fill it up with grease. It makes this job so much easier. Put the bearing on. Tighten that down. Just push. You can actually stand up and even stand on it. Like that, the bearing is ready to go. A little bit on the outside edge, just for good measure.
So I flip the rotor over, grease the race, and then Bill heavily greased the bearing nicely. Drop it in. Grab the supplied seal, put that on, tap it into place, and then grease the seal, and then we can put it on. Line it up on the spindle, slide your front one on. Install the supplied keyed washer. Put your nut on, and then tighten it down to spec, and then put your cotter pin on. Now that we have our rotor on, we can install our caliper with the supplied bolts, put a little red Loctite on. Install your front brake line into the caliper. Install your brake cable back into the brake line bracket and install the new horseshoe clip. Now the brake lines actually come with extra adapters for different size fittings, but luckily we have the right size fitting for the right size brake line. Now that we have everything connected for our brake lines and our brakes, we're gonna jump on the rear, install everything there. Now for the rear, there's a couple different shim kits for different size bearings that we have. Now you find the right one that you need, slide it onto the rear end, slide your axle back into place. Slide your retaining bracket back on. Slide your bracket in place. And then tighten it down with the factory nuts. Install the bolts into the primary bracket for the secondary bracket. Slide your bracket into place. And then put your nuts on.
I have the rotor up into place while Brennan's grabbing the actual caliper. It's gonna be a little bit of a snug fit. We have to bump it a little bit to get it to go on.
Now that we have everything tight here, we're gonna install our brake line and then our e-brake cables. Okay, so for our final step for the brake system, all we have to do is just put our brake lines on. Just take the bolt out. Remember to put a copper washer on each side of the brake line block and then tighten it down. Put your brake line bracket on and then connect it to your brake line hose. Now for this bracket, it's just a universal bracket, so all we're gonna do is we're gonna clean the rear end, just weld it on. You can do whatever you want to mount these brackets.
So we're just about finished converting Project Betty to a 4-wheel disc brake system with our CJ Classic kit. Brennan's throwing the e-brake cables on now. In a future video, we'll actually show you how to hook up the e-brake as well as bleed the brakes. Make sure you keep it here for more updates on Project Betty.